Hi there and welcome to Bike File, the show that sorts out the best bikes for you to buy. Each week we'll look at a different category of bikes, and this week it's the turn of the most useful bikes on the planet. Yep, it's the sports tourers. Bikes that can cover the distance and give you a real good laugh when you get there. So, here's a sneak preview of what's coming next. Louise will be getting out and about on Ducati's Monster 620. Rod will be getting to grips with the BMW R1200 CL. And for those of you thinking about splashing the cash on a sports tourer, then we've got our buyer's guide coming up later. And now we come to our first sports tourer of the day with this, the Kawasaki ZZR1200. Now, if this bike looks strangely familiar to some of you, don't be worried about it. It's because this is an adapted, breathed upon and tweaked version of Kawasaki's ZZR1100, the legendary top speed king that ruled the high speed charts for all of 6 years until Honda's Blackbird came along to snatch the crown. Now then, the ZZR11 was a very fast motorcycle, something that struck fear, awe and trepidation into the hearts of all who came across it, and anybody who had bikes in their life and a pulse in their body wanted to go on one.
It has to be said, the ZZR1200 will never inherit the 1100's mantle. Where the 1100's bulbous ugliness was perfectly acceptable in the light of its relative performance merits, the ZZR1200 is, by and large, simply unattractive and overweight. Time, fashion and super fast motorcycles have moved on, and the ZZR12 just ain't in the in crowd anymore. But then that's not what Kawasaki wanted it to do. After all, they're already packing the best hyperbike on the market in their lineup with the latest incarnation of the ZX12, so launching another model to compete against it could hardly be a smart move. Nope, the ZZR1200's remit is a very different one.
Instead of heading out there to be a cutting-edge hyperblaster, the ZZR1200 is a far more all-rounded, balanced, real-world alternative that just happens to have as an added bonus one serious rush of speed, if that happens to be your drug of choice. Coming to the practicalities of the thing, let's start with the comfort, because this seat is palatial. It will even make the VFR's perch feel positively anorexic by comparison. Your pillion perch really isn't far off being as good as the rider's side either. And as well as that, there's this huge fairing up here which cocoons you from head to toe in a lovely bubble of peaceful, still air.
Best of all though, there's the motor. Against a higher booster or a ZX12 it may feel a bit slow, and true, being carbureted it does spin up with a little less urgency than more modern sporting beasts. But get on the gas and you will be left in no doubt that this is still one brutally fast piece of machinery. Chassis and suspension have been worked over too from the original ZZR, with geometry tweaks throughout to speed up the steering and an all-over helping of extra chassis stiffness.
The ZZR1200 suspension works very well within the limits of the bike, i.e. good fast cruising, open roads. You can even do some scratching, get a bit energetic in the tight stuff if that's what you want to do. However, push on too hard, get into real sports bike mode, and the budget nature of this suspension will start to show itself up as the whole plot becomes a little unglued, bounces around, you don't get so much feedback to get on in confidence. But really, if you want to ride that hard, may I suggest you look elsewhere for your jollies. Otherwise, ZZR1200 holds its own very well indeed.
Obviously, it's not all perfect. Like I said earlier, it is an ugly motorcycle, and despite all the tweaks and fiddles, it will take more than a redesigned fairing and a big bore to convince anyone that this is much more than a dusted off and dressed up ZZR1100.
And with its makeup so firmly rooted in the past, there's no surprises to find a host of old school touches on the ZZR1200. For example, there are those great big analogue clocks, there are mirrors the size of dinner plates, and for anyone who's been riding fuel injected bikes recently, best get used to the fact there's a fuel tap on this one and it's running carbs. Therefore, soon as you run out, you better get quick on the draw with getting to that tap before you stutter to a halt. So, fashion and the complexities of a modern age have largely passed the Big Z by. But this is no bad thing, because beneath all that, this is a very good, very fast, comfortable mile muncher that is actually quite hard to beat. So, how does it stack up in the scores?
Performance, 8 out of 10. You've got a lot of bang for your buck with this motorcycle. Style, 5 out of 10. She's no beauty queen, and that's for sure. Comfort, 9 out of 10. You really could cross continents in a day, no worries on one of these 2-up or solo. Reliability, 6 out of 10. Given that it comes from the ZZR1100, the basis of this bike is actually quite old. And if it's anything like the 1100 was, then things like chains, tyres, cush drives and head bearings are all in for a rough ride. Value for money, 8 out of 10. If fashion isn't your thing but big miles are and you still want some fun to be had while you're at it, then this really could be money well spent.
So there you have it, the ZZR1200. Now a bit later in the show I'm going to be riding Honda's VFR to see how it compares, but before we do that, let's look at something a little different because Louise has got Ducati's Monster 620.
In a market they pretty much created, Ducati have seen sales decline in their once all-conquering Monster 600. So, in the face of Japanese challengers, Ducati have redesigned the baby Monster and given it a bit of a facelift in the shape of this, the new 620 IE. With an extra 35cc, a new frame derived from the S4, upgraded suspension and better brakes, this bike's looking like a really tidy package and basically is a completely new model in the Monster range. The 620 is available in two forms, the standard version like this one, or the sportier S model. With the S you get better ground clearance, a bikini fairing and a smart alley swinger. But to be quite honest, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the standard version. Do you know, over the years Ducati have sold over 100,000 units of these around the world, and sales like that can only be compared to the Vespa scooter of the 50s. Bored out to 620cc, the engine is still an air-cooled 90-degree V-twin with single-cam Desmodronic valves. Now, with a larger airbox and bigger diameter valves, this lump now pumps out a healthy 60 brake horsepower. Torque is up too. With the extra power, Ducati have upgraded the brakes with 320mm discs with Brembo calipers, good initial bite, but smooth with great feedback through the new, more responsive forks. Riding the bike, you can feel the differences between this and earlier versions. The familiar vibrations still make their way through both the bars and the foot pegs, but without being a pain.
I really like all the changes they've made. They're certainly all for the better, and the Ducati still looks as beautiful as it always has done. Oh, and one more thing. Thank goodness they've got rid of that spring-loaded side stand. Performance. Well, let's give it 8 out of 10. This is a completely new bike, and at its heart, a revitalised V-twin. Now, as for the comfort factor, let's give it 7 out of 10. It's an interesting position riding the Monster. The bars are well spaced out, but they're not too high and they're not too low, so it's the kind of bike that you can do quite a lot of miles on. Great for commuting to work, great for zipping through town. Ooh, don't you just love it?
Build quality at Ducati has come on in leaps and bounds over the last 5 years, and these bikes are no longer considered unreliable. The old air-cooled V-twin engine has benefited from many years of development and can rival any Japanese motor. So I reckon, build quality, we'll give it 9 out of 10. Value for money? It's got to be 9 out of 10. A bike with looks, poise, heritage and passion running right the way through it. And it's got electronic fuel injection, all for £5 grand. I feel a little spoilt, really.
So that was Ducati's Monster 620. Not necessarily a bike you'd like to go a long way on, but a good fun option nonetheless, especially for those who are a bit shorter in the leg. Now for something a bit bigger, we've already checked out Kawasaki's ZZR1200, but how about a sharper sports tourer? Here's Aprilia's Futura.
More unkind souls reckon the Futura looks like it's just wandered off the set of Blake's 7, and with its super angular looks, they do actually have a fair point. Personally though, I reckon it's a neat and individual take on the VFR theme. Performance is what. Aprilia's now ubiquitous 1000cc 60-degree V-twin lump, as found in the saucy Mille and Mille R, is at the heart of matters, which means loads of lovely stomp with some nice booming top-end power to warm your cockles and please the hooligan in all of us. What it also means is a stiff and clunky gearbox and a heavy clutch. Out on the open road, when you're flowing smooth and sweet, these really aren't a problem, but finicky town work will have you cursing them inside half an hour. The chassis is, as we've come to expect from Aprilia, tight and very much on the sporty side of touring. Given the choice between one of these or a VFR to take to a track day, I'd go for the Aprilia any day of the week. Brakes are dead smart too, although outright power is slightly lacking. Then again, if that's really your bag, go for a sportier bike. Performance, 8 out of 10. Excellent chassis, excellent motor, only let down slightly by those brakes. Style, love it or loathe it. If you love it, I reckon we could go as high as giving this a 7 out of 10. Comfort, 8 out of 10. As good as a VFR, apart from that clutch in town. Reliability, 7 out of 10. Okay, it may not last into the next millennium like a VFR does, but with good servicing, shouldn't be a problem at all. Value for money, 8 out of 10. A good solid purchase.
Right, well that's it for the Kawasaki ZZR1200, and out of that, or the Futura or the Monster 620, I would have to take the Kawasaki any day just because it is so damn fast. Anyway, that's it for part 1, but please join us again in part 2, when I'm going to be out on Honda's VFR and Louise will have all the tips you need for buying a sports tourer. Hi there and welcome back to Bike File with me, Wazza, where this week we're looking at sports tourers. And how could we possibly talk sports tourers without talking about one of these, Honda's VFR, which I'm going to be testing shortly to see how it compares against Kawasaki's ZZR12 and Aprilia's Futura. But in the meantime, here's Rod.
There was always something inevitable about the R1200C. BMW have long been masters of the intercontinental touring bike, and when the original 1200 Custom was added to the catalogue back in '97, a custom-style tourer was always on the cards. After all, the Japanese weren't slow to appreciate a market once dominated by Harley's Electroglide, and if anything was going to give the Goldwing and its pals a run for their money, then why not a Beamer? And so it was that the R1200 CL finally took its place in the catalogue, alongside BMW's more traditional European-styled tourers like the R1150 RT. Both bikes share the big boxer engine, but the 1200's softer state of tune pushes out only 61 brake horsepower. Where it does score is in the whopping 72 foot-pounds of torque, tuned to peak at only 3,000 RPM. As you might imagine, this makes for a big, soft, relaxed feel to the engine. I don't know how big the European market is for the R1200 CL, but personally I'm delighted that BMW have chosen to import this bike into the UK. Slotting in at the top of the Boxer range, it offers a quality option to the company's other hard-charging, high-speed tourers. This comes with heated grips, a heated seat and a CD player. It's also a lot less chunky looking than some of the big Beamers, and careful attention to styling has turned it into quite an elegant package. Although I've always liked BMW's Boxers, I took an instant dislike to the original R1200C, which looked like it had been designed by a committee who had only read about custom styling and had never seen how an elegant motorcycle should look. The R1200 CL exonerates BMW's styling department, taking the ugly duckling cruiser and recasting it as a stylish tourer. The low seat height is maintained, which makes it easy to manage, and the stylists have turned their expertise to adding extra lights to the fairing. The R1200 CL is pitched head-on at the Honda Goldwing and may even take some sails away from Harley's Electroglide. It's a tough call on all counts, but I like the clean lines of this Beamer, and it certainly feels a lot less of an incredible hulk than some of its rivals. One thing's for sure, there's been no cost cutting, and everything here has been very carefully designed to work properly, right from the word go. So let's see how it scores. For performance, I'm going to give this bike 7 out of 10. It's relaxing to ride rather than exciting, but it does its job with BMW's usual competence. For comfort, I really have to rate this bike. For once, even my well-built 6'4" frame didn't overstretch the fairing provision. 9 out of 10 for comfort. BMW's legendary reputation for build quality should give punters the confidence to sleep soundly each night. The advanced electronic engine management is the best available, and the Boxer engine has a heritage which spans 7 decades, all put together by a company renowned for attention to detail. It has to be another 9 for build quality. If there's anything that does let the big Beamer down, it's street cred. Although it has the style, it doesn't capture the charisma of a Harley, and Honda have been busily building a worldwide legion of dedicated Goldwing fans for nigh on 25 years. Shame, but only 4 out of 10 for street cred. And now, from one thing that's going to go on and on and on to another, it's Wazza!
Thanks for that, Rod. And now that we've seen a whole load of sports tourers, here's Louise with all the lowdown buying information you could possibly want to bag yourself a bargain.
Fancy a trip to the south of France or further afield? Then get yourself a Tourer. These immense machines will go for miles at speed while you enjoy the scenery as it flies by. But do they look and perform in a satisfactory manner?
A Tourer really will perform in line with a lot of your performance bikes or sports bikes. CC starting from probably 800cc going up to sort of 1300cc. So you don't really lose an awful lot of that performance, and with a sports tourer you've more often than not got the handling and the comfort as well.
The sports tourers now are becoming like more of a performance bike, but you can stick the wife and panniers on the back.
Performance-wise, they do what you'd expect them to do and eat up the miles. The more sport-based tourers can be fun to thrash. And as for styling, that varies quite a bit in this class. They range from not bad to bland to what the hell were they thinking?
You can actually take the panniers off and you can go for a good blast on a Sunday, and then should you want the next weekend to go out and tour around England on it, then you can just bolt the panniers off and away you go. They are very much dual purpose bikes.
These bikes are built for all-day riding, so yes, they are as comfy as a two-wheeled vehicle moving at speed can be. Cushy seat, upright riding position and big fairing to keep the wind off your bonds, they're about as comfy and as practical as a bike can be. But will they leave you stranded by the side of the autobahn?
The bikes are set up, especially the Tourers, for covering big distances. So the bikes are all keyed in to they are very low maintenance, so that when you are travelling around Europe, you don't have a niggling worry that the bike isn't going to hold up and it isn't going to perform, that you can just go to it and it will start and off you go and cross another border.
Running costs are again very similar to some of your larger performance bikes, muscle bikes, grouped somewhere insurance-wise in between the two. Fuel economy is normally a concern, as is emissions, because of the miles these bikes are expected to do. Large fuel capacity, very reasonable, very good value for money again.
Tourers tend to be reliable. There's not much point buying a bike for big miles and having it break down if only after a few. They should run forever, a bit like a crazed Jack Russell. They're a sensible bike. If Ned Flanders were a biker, I bet he'd own a Tourer. But don't let that put you off. Hustling one of these through a good set of bends is quite an achievement. They're sensible bikes for sensible people.
And so with the buying information out of the way, where better to spend your sports touring wedge than on a Honda VFR? This bike is quite simply a living legend and has trounced all comers in the sports tourers class in its various guises over the years, and quite rightly so. It is pure Honda, impeccably well thought out, so refined it hurts, and frankly, this bike is capable of turning its hand to just about anything this side of a motocross Grand Prix.
And every time I ride a VFR, I have the same problem, because I have fun and I don't want to. You know, I'm still young, and a VFR is a sensible bike, an old man's bike, a bike for people with less imagination than your average traffic cone. But try as you might to convince yourself the VFR's really not your thing. Ride one and I challenge you not to be won over in nanoseconds.
Take the VFR riding position for example. It is a perfect blend of the sporty and the comfortable. Here is a bike you could just as easily spend all day on, be it tooling across town or hacking down motorways, as you could blasting down the best alpine passes you could possibly find without breaking into a sweat. And backing up this riding position that lets you do it all, there's a motor that's going to let you do it all as well.
Still only just tipping the 100 brake horsepower mark at the back wheel, the VFR's motor is as refined as the rest of the bike. There's a healthy dose of character thanks to the V4 lump behind those fairing panels, and there's a lovely, easy-going, torquey drive right off the bottom of the tacho, which means easy speed is at your disposal whenever you fancy it.
In a nutshell, Honda's VTEC is variable valve timing, and what it means in theory is that below 7,000 RPM the motor's running on 2 valves per cylinder. This doesn't quite give you optimum performance, but it does give you better torque. However, cross that 7,000 RPM watershed, we're onto 4 valves per cylinder for maximum performance. That's the theory. What you've got in practice is below 7,000 you've got normal VFR shove, just like the old bike. But across that watershed and whoosh, the whole thing picks up its skirts and heads off into the horizon, with a lovely burble coming out the exhaust as well. It could even be called a little bit exciting.
The chassis saw a host of updates when this model came in last year too, with a stiffer and revised steering head, frame spars and frame brackets, which all mean better control and more responsiveness when you're tramping on.
Link brakes still come as standard on the VFR, which means a little bit of back brake gives you a bit of front brake and vice versa. But to be honest, in practice, you're unlikely to notice them at all. What you will notice is plenty of stopping power everywhere. Although, if you want 10/10 braking, you're still going to have to take a fair old tug on that lever. So there we have it, the Honda VFR. Still a legend after all these years, and still the best sports tourer that money can buy. Now it's time for the scores.
Performance, 9 out of 10. Excels at nothing, but is great at everything. Style, 7 out of 10. Never going to be stunning anyone, but it's kind of pleasingly smooth and chunky enough to get away with it. Comfort, 9 out of 10. Yes, you could spend all day, all night, all of the next day, and probably an entire month aboard one of these without coming to any grief. Reliability, 10 out of 10. If the dinosaurs have motorbikes, they were probably VFRs, and if you buy one of these, chances are you'll be able to run it for 100,000 miles before you finally decide you've had enough of the colour and you chop it in for another one. Value for money, 8 out of 10. You pay a premium to buy one, be it new or second hand, but they hold their money well and they will probably last forever.
Well, sadly, that's it for another episode of Bike File. But don't worry, because we're back again next week when we're going to have more chrome than you can shake a stick at on the show. Yes, it's going to be laid-back cruising time. So join us then, and we're going to have, amongst other bikes, Harley's spanking, glitzy new V-Rod. So we'll see you then.